So I'm joined this morning by this esteemed panel who will each introduce themselves and explain their passion and why they are here today. Now I'd like to bring Rose onto the stage.
Hello.
Rose, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi. Hi. I hope you can hear me. My internet might be playing up. So why am I here? So I'm Rose Shand. I am the global HR business partner for a very large IT company. I'm also the chair of diversity, inclusion, belonging and equity, and which means I'm responsible for diversity inclusion across 30,000 people in around 11 countries. So the reason why I'm here, I need to go back into history as to why I'm here. So in my early 20s, I was both a feminist and a Black nationalist. And I joined various groups because I was passionate about equality in both areas. What I found was it was very difficult for my voice to be heard and for me to be in the body of both groups. They weren't overly inclusive. I was subject to stereotypical comments, microaggressive behaviors. Some groups were worse than others. I'm also Black British, and both my parents, they come from Trinidad. They're called immigrants, even though they wouldn't consider themselves as immigrants. They went from one part of the British Empire to another part of the British Empire. So from Trinidad to England. So they don't consider themselves as immigrants. That's another story. But as a child of my parents, I experienced similar experiences in both countries, both Trinidad and in the UK. Both I felt excluded in both. I felt different in both countries. In both countries, they considered me a foreigner. In both countries, they said I spoke funny or used different words. But one country was worse than the other. I felt more included in one country than the other. These experiences I'm now grateful for because they help me to understand the bias and discrimination. It's not just about black and white, male and female. It's multi-layered and it's very complex. There are different systems of oppression, and sometimes a lot of people suffer overlapping oppression. So I'm here because I am passionate about diversity and inclusion. I'm passionate about intersectionality, and I'm passionate that any solutions that we have are not just simple, based on the real problems which are very, very complex.
Spotlight. Okay, I'd like to bring Rose back. Hello, Rose. Let me add you onto
Hey.
onto the floor again. So, as a Black woman working in the corporate HR space, as you do, and you're also a mother of two amazing daughters, what discrimination do you feel you face personally? We talked a lot about intersectionality. What's your reality, and what are your hopes and aspirations for your daughters?
Oh my goodness. Okay, great question. So as a HR person in a very kind of high profile, and I've always been quite high profile role, I've got a history of employee relations, and I know employment law quite well. You're going to be a very interesting person if you're going to show any kind of discrimination against me. So I think there's discrimination that is hidden and there's discrimination that is obvious. And I am very aware of what I call HR privilege. So people will act very differently when it comes to me. So I can't tell you a story. Well, I can tell you one story, which I choose not to, but I can't tell you stories about the discrimination that I personally have felt because I have my HR privilege, right? However, one thing I will say is that when I was looking for a job, at the time, the stats were something like you would get 3 interviews before you got a job, something like that, 3 or 5 interviews. I can't remember, it was a while ago. And I was getting around 10 to 15 interviews, you know. I realized that my career trajectory should have been like this, but it was kind of like this, you know. What happens with me is that you go to research, and the research says that there was a study from the Department of Works and Pension, I think it was 2009, I can't remember what it was, and they said that they had two lots of CVs, one CV, Black and Asian name, other CVs with white sounding names, and the people with Black and Asian names were not called for interviews in the same proportion as the other. You know, right? And the same thing for females. Now, I'm Black and I'm female. And so that is obviously going to affect me, but I won't be able to see it because it's just my one experience. I didn't get that job. And I, in good faith, I'm assuming they did it because I didn't have the experience. So, in answer to your question, is I can't give you experience of overt discrimination because of my HR privilege. I'm researched enough to know that it happens, but it doesn't happen in a way that I can challenge it. My children are very clued up. Their Generation X and Generation Z are much more clued up than I was. If they experience any kind of discrimination, and I'm talking about microaggressions and bias or discrimination, they will naturally say something because of that, what I called entitled characteristics, which I love, by the way, I love. So my aspirations for my children is that they keep on finding their brave. So they find their brave and they say what they need to say when they need to say it. I think I love the way that they look for people who are not like them to understand the world better, and I would want that the other way around as well. And finally, and I think most importantly, rather than calling stuff out in the workplace, call stuff in the workplace. So rather than alienating people, getting upset, blah blah blah, call people in, help them understand your world, and hopefully help raise their awareness. Does that answer your
Excellent.
question?
Yeah, I like that. Calling out, call them in. Yeah, I like that idea. And I'm picking up on the point about the fact that you probably face discrimination, but you were unaware because your control group was just yourself. I can sort of reflect on that. When I was looking for roles probably 5 years ago, just after I gender transitioned, I probably applied for 100 plus roles. I got shortlisted for probably half a dozen, and I've applied for lots of NED roles since. And I can't be sure that I'm being denied the opportunity as a trans woman because it could just be there are better people for the job. But statistically, I'd have thought I'd have been lucky at least once by now. But yeah, never getting past the shortlist, never getting past the first interview, etc., etc. So I think
Yeah.
it's we start to build that pattern in our mind, whether it's true, but the narrative's still there, that discrimination that is in our minds all the time. So yeah, your HR privilege is probably your spidey senses were kicking in eventually, and you
Yeah.
realize what was actually going on. Yeah.